Good evening to you all, Yali Mother, and a very warm welcome to the launch of the Aga Khan Foundation UK's new lecture series entitled Stories from the Silk Road, Kyrgyz Republic and the Aga Khan Development Network, here at the Ismaili Centre, London. This specially curated series aims to raise awareness about the impactful work of the Aga Khan Foundation over the past 50 years and to share stories of real-life impact from the field with the Jamaat. By way of introduction, I am Anushka Lakhani, and it is a privilege to be your MC this evening. We are honoured to welcome two distinguished speakers this evening. Our guest, Dr. Berkat Fazil, diplomatic representative of the Aga Khan Development Network in the Kyrgyz Republic and former president of the National Council for USA, in conversation with Christopher Wilton Steer, renowned photographer and author of The Silk Road, A Living History, and global lead communications at the Aga Khan Foundation. During tonight's first lecture of the series, Dr. Fazil and Christopher will take us on a captivating journey as we explore the history, culture, and visual landscapes of the Silk Road, with a special focus on the Kyrgyz Republic. Before handing over to our speakers, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Shodagal Alimshova, the Aga Khan Foundation UK's National Committee member, for an opening statement. Following this, Dr. Fazil and Christopher will speak for around 45 minutes.
Good evening, Inyali Madad. It's a great pleasure and honor to welcome you all this evening to the first of our new lecture series, Stories from the Silk Road, Kyrgyz Republic, and the Aga Khan Development Network. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Whether you're here for the first time or you have supported the Aga Khan Foundation and the Aga Khan Development Network for many years, we're truly pleased to have you with us for this special occasion. Tonight's event is deeply personal to me. Growing up in Tajikistan and along the Silk Road, I was one of the many beneficiaries of the work of the Aga Khan Foundation and the wider Aga Khan Development Network. I'm a proud graduate of the Aga Khan Lycée and an AKF scholar, and in turn, when I started my career in international development. Experiences that have shaped my life and my career in profound ways. Today, I'm proud to serve on the Aga Khan Foundation United Kingdom National Committee. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on why we're here today and what brings us together. Let me begin with a quote from our beloved Shah Karim, may peace be upon him, His late Highness the Aga Khan IV, from his speech at the inauguration of the Aga Khan Bagh in Versova, India in 1983, and I quote, "There are those who enter the world in such poverty that they are deprived of both the means and the motivation to improve their lot. Unless these unfortunates can be touched with a spark which ignites the spirit of individual enterprise and determination, they will only sink back into renewed apathy, degradation, and despair. It is for us who are more fortunate to provide that spark." End of quote. For over 50 years, this is exactly what the Aga Khan Foundation has done, helping to create strong community institutions that support sustainable, locally driven initiatives to improve lives. Whether it's enabling a young girl to access education in a remote village, strengthening healthcare systems, or supporting artisans to preserve centuries-old traditions. AKF's work goes beyond survival. It builds the foundation for lasting progress. Many of you here today have been part of this journey. Your support has helped lives of those who are less fortunate. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Jamaat for your continued support to AKF, both here in the UK and around the world. Thank you. This evening, we're excited to share with you some stories of real change and impact from the work of Aga Khan Foundation and the Aga Khan Development Network in Central Asia, a region rich in history and resilience. The Silk Road is often romanticized as a route of trade and adventure, but in truth, it has long been a vital thread connecting diverse cultures, languages, and ideas. The Kyrgyz Republic is one such place along this route, and it's there AKDN has worked for many years, supporting communities to achieve lasting and meaningful change. First, I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Barkat, who has already been introduced, but to add a bit more, the diplomatic representative of the Aga Khan Development Network. Dr. Barkat is a physician specializing in infectious disease, and alongside his medical work, he has dedicated over 3 decades to voluntary service and a wide range of leadership roles, including serving as the president of the Ismaili Council for the USA. He has also been involved in coordinating landmark agreements between the Ismaili Imamate in the US, state of Texas, California, and Illinois. Dr. Barkat also serves on the advisory committee of Chautauqua Institution's Abrahamic program, which builds understanding between Jews, Christians, and Muslims. We're so honored to have him with us to share his deep insights into AKDN's development work in the Kyrgyz Republic and beyond. To add to Christopher's biographer, who is the author of The Silk Road, A Living History, he is also a global lead of communication at AKF. Christopher's work has taken him to some of the most remote places across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. He has been featured in National Geographic, The Guardian, CNN, The Financial Times, and Der Spiegel, among others. His goal is to encourage others to take the road less traveled, to explore, experience, and connect with new places, people, and perspectives. Together, Dr. Fazal and Christopher will guide us this evening on the remarkable journey, blending photography, storytelling, and cultural experiences, and how development and cultural heritage intersect in meaningful ways. Please welcome warmly to the stage Dr. Barkat Fazal and Christopher Wilton, who traveled from Central Asia and Kenya to be with us here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here and to take you on this journey today and to speak with Barkat. We thought we'd break this up into a few different ways and start with a little bit about what the Silk Road is, why it's of interest today, still today, and why AKF and AKDN are still interested, or very interested in this part of the world. Then we can take you on a little bit of a journey through Kyrgyzstan. So let me start with the Silk Road. So, as many of you all know, the Silk Road is neither a single road nor route. It refers to a network of trading routes that have stretched thousands of miles across Eurasia, connecting China with Central and South Asia, the Middle East, and Europe for over 2,000 years. It was established in around 138 BCE when the Han dynasty sent one of its generals eastward to make diplomatic and cultural links with the people of Central Asia. And in so doing started the creation of this transcontinental trade route that would really shape the world as it is today. sorry, lost my place there. But it was not only, 2,000 years ago, this would mean that you would find Romans garbed in silk that was produced in China, and you would have coins bearing Caesar's image being used in spice markets in Kerala. But it wasn't only goods that travelled along the Silk Road, but people, knowledge, and religions too. Gunpowder, the magnetic compass, printing press, advanced mathematics, geometry, astrology, all came to Europe along these trade routes from China and the Islamic world. Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam each found new converts along these trade routes, and along them also came the Mongol armies which swept into Europe along with bubonic plague. And these exchanges had profound impact on the cities, civilizations, and nations that they passed through, giving them economic, political, and cultural shape. But by the late 16th century, the Silk Road overland trade routes had lost much of their luster to the maritime trade routes, which allowed for much easier and cheaper exchange of goods. But that legacy of interconnectivity endured. And today, it is being reimagined on this massive scale through China's, flagship foreign policy initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative, that aims through a network of pipelines, railways, ports, roads, and more to connect about 65% of the world's population and reshape the flow of global trade. There's an ancient Chinese proverb that says, if you want to get rich, build a road. And it very much looks like the Chinese are still at it. My interest in the Silk Road goes back a long time to my probably university days or before that. And I'd lived in Beijing when I was 24, and I flew back and forth once in a while and looked out the window and realized how little I knew about the place in between. And I always dreamt to perhaps one day of traveling overland along this route. And years later, I found myself working for the Aga Khan Foundation, and I started visiting numerous countries in Central and South Asia. I started to think, wow, there's an interesting story to tell here. AKF and AKDN agencies have worked, as many of you know, for hundreds of years in regions along the Silk Road, investing, I'm going to say, a lot of money and effort into the restoration of historic monuments, hospitals, schools, energy, you name it. But actually very few people know about that. And so a few years ago, I was speaking to our CEO in the UK, Matt Reed, and we thought, why not tell a story about our organization through this idea of the Silk Road, which has such interesting and broad appeal. And so I somehow managed to persuade him that it was a good idea for me to spend 4 months traveling overland from London to Beijing, photographing people, places, and cultures in between, and of course the work of the Aga Khan Development Network as well, and turning that into a story that we could tell to lots of people. And so that took the form, as some of you all know, in an exhibition that was put up outdoors in Granary Square in King's Cross, that was shown in 2021, 2022, also in the Aga Khan Park in Toronto, and in the book as well, which I have before me today. But that's enough a little about the background. Now we're going to get into Kyrgyzstan and zero in on it. And in order to introduce you to Kyrgyzstan, Central Asia, and the Aga Khan Development Network, we thought we'd start with where it is. So I'll hand over to Barkat at this point.
One of the things is when I got appointed as a diplomatic rep, I was asked to do some reading. And one of the books was from Fred Starr, who's a professor at Johns Hopkins. And he has books, Lost Civilization. And when I started reading, I was actually shocked at how uneducated I was about Central Asia. I looked into between 9th and 12th century, he calls it as it was the center of the world. And the reason for the center of the world, and there are other high scholars here, I'm sure they know more about it, but when I looked into it, they had really greatly influenced the development of mathematics, astronomy, literature, linguistics, political science, religion, architecture, medicine. Talk about anything that went through the Central Asia. There are some people, Al-Khwarizmi, who was father of algebra. Through his book was called Al-Jabr. That's how the algebra name comes in. Umar Khayyam, Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, Al-Biruni, all these people had been in Central Asia, and nobody gives the credit to Central Asia about what they did in those times, and all the credit goes to the Western countries, all we see, but never has been a kind of an education where you see in the Western education that these are the pioneers, and these are the people who really were responsible during those centuries to invent and to increase the education knowledge and about everything else from the Central Asia. So people keep asking, where is Kyrgyzstan? And I had the same question because I had never been to Kyrgyzstan when I was appointed. And when I go first time to see that, I have to say that it's a magical place. It is something that you read about it, but you land in that. It's one of the most beautiful, picturesque country you can see. And it is a small country. It's a country where the population is 7 million. It's half of what Metro London population, I believe. So you can imagine a country where there is. And the language is Russian, historically, because they're former Soviet Union. But also they're promoting a lot of Kyrgyz language, which is the language of Turkic origin. Now, people talk about the stans, the 5 stans we talk about, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan. Interestingly, the 4 stans, other than Tajikistan, they have Turkic origin. Actually, the people in Turkey come from Central Asia, from those Turkic origin countries, and Tajikistan is the only Persian speaking or related civilization-wise there. And it is one of the poor stans, one of the five stans. Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are the poorest of all. And you also see the education levels, thanks to the Soviet Union, was high literacy level, but not necessarily the quality which I think the world has moved on. So you see the difference, when you go and talk to people about the education. We talk about the critical thinking skills and all those things at a whole different level there.
Perhaps we can talk a little bit about one of the major threats that Kyrgyzstan faces at the moment. These are all articles that have been published in the last year or so, but climate change is by far one of the largest, having the largest outsized impact on Kyrgyzstan. I believe it's heating up at a rate that's twice what most other countries are heating up at. And the consequences of this are melting glaciers, knock-on effects of natural disasters, and putting their water security hugely into threat as well. Perhaps, Barkat, you could talk.
Yeah, I think, as I was mentioning, one of the most pictures you can see, this is the video they took from the heli, and this is the landscape we talk about. These are the Tian Mountains, which are called Celestial Mountains. And, it's just a spectacular view that you can get.
And I believe, if I'm right in thinking, these mountains cover about 80% of Kyrgyzstan's landmass. So just say
94% of Kyrgyzstan is just mountains. So you can imagine this is what you see when you take off.
Now, perhaps, Barkat, you can tell us, why is AKDN working in Kyrgyzstan? It's an interesting thing. I think people from Tajikistan who are here show they go, probably your parents may probably have experienced more. As we recall that in mid-90s, 94 through 97, 96, there was a civil war in Tajikistan. And Gorno-Badakhshan being southeast of Tajikistan, and as designed by Soviet Union, no region was independent, and they had so there was the Jamaat in that area was suffering quite a bit, to an extent that there was a famine because no food was coming in through.
because the war, nothing comes through Dushanbe to Khorog, and it's a pretty long drive, 18 hours drive. Beautiful drive, but it's 18 hours. So during that time, Shah Karim then contacted the Kyrgyz government, and also the work with Kyrgyz government. And Kyrgyz government was very, very upcoming. President was President Akayev, with the foreign minister then, Askar Akhmetov. They had gone through the parliament to assist Shah Karim at the time, and they created a humanitarian corridor from Osh. This is the road. What you see, the road is the road traveled by the trucks that had saved the Jamaat in Gorno-Badakhshan. So for us, it's like going and traveling through that road. When I was traveling through that road, it's very, you feel that the work of imamat. Because at the time, USAID, United Nations, and several organizations in the West Europe, they all came together, and the trucks start rolling down the hills and the mountains of Gorno-Badakhshan. And that's how the Jamaat got saved in one way. And then Hazrat Shah Karim went to thank President Akayev, and he was a professor of math and physics from the Soviet time, and so Shah Karim asked him, "What can we do? You helped us. What can we do?" He was very smart and said, "We need two things: education and inclusive economic development." Those are the two things he asked, and that's how the work of AKDN started. The first thing, as a symbolic thing, was the school in Osh. And the Osh, where the trucks left and went through Murghab into Gorno-Badakhshan, that's why we started education, Akhan School in Osh. And over a period of time, you can see in every oblast, there are 7 oblasts or provinces in Kyrgyzstan. Everywhere we are present. Over a period of time, we grew in the finance. AKF, of course, has a huge presence, and several other areas that we are present in Kyrgyzstan.
So now we know a little bit about the Silk Road, a little bit about why AKDN is in Kyrgyzstan. We now want to take you on a journey through the country, and we're going to be following the route that I took in 2019. So I came in through Uzbekistan, you can see there, to Osh. This is on the left-hand side, the western side, up through Uzgen, Jalalabad. We're going to go up to Bishkek, come down past the alpine lake of Songkul to Narin, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, and then we're going to come down this road we just showed you, back to where we began. So let's start where X marks the spot. That's in Osh. And Barkat.
Yeah, Osh was actually one of the crossroads of Silk Road. 3,000-year-old town, not much is left, 3,000-year-old structures there. But one thing which is of interest is before Babur went to Afghanistan and then India, now India-Pakistan, this is where when he lost in Uzbekistan, he came to Osh. He stayed in the Suleiman Tugh, the mountain. That's where the picture was taken. The Suleiman Tugh, the mountain where this Babur house. He stayed for a while before he started his journey to go into Afghanistan, and then he formed the Mughal dynasty. So that's kind of an interesting thing about Osh. And here was mentioning the school. This school was established in 2002. And there are about 500 students there. And, some people say, what is the impact of it? And it was interesting. This last month, I was with a member of parliament there. Young, she's in her 30s. And she comes and tells me, do you know about me? And I had her bio and all those things. Yes. I'm a graduate of Aga Khan School, Osh. And, those things that, when people ask, why do we work the way we work? And this is the impact we leave. And I was talking to another minister who says he's original from Osh's family. He said, both my kids go to Aga Khan School in Osh. So that's kind of the impact that we have. And when we work with folks there in the government, they do know who we are and what we do. And they are the people who then tell people, because they always say, why we are there, you're bringing, changing people, you're going to make them Ismailis, you're Shias, all those things come up. And these are the people who swear and stand by us, besides us, and say, no, don't worry about them. I've been to that school, and this is what they do, so do not even talk about that. So this is the impact of that. Now this Aga Khan school, as I was mentioning, about 500, and it's a STEAM school. It's a STEM plus arts. And they just had a STEAM festival just last month. It was phenomenal. The whole schools in Osh come together and have it at Aga Khan school. And it was the first school that was awarded a license from the Ministry of Education to offer a certified professional development programs to the government school teachers. So that's kind of impact that these schools have. And 95% plus students from this goes to the university. So it's a school which is a well-known school, and there are a lot of copycats now coming up, particularly the private schools coming up from Turkish schools and all those things, but still it has its own standing. One of the things is, and thanks to the AKF UK, I should say, a grant, Schools 2030 program. It's a very unique thing which AKF together with other agencies have put together. These are 100 schools in each country, 10 countries, and Kyrgyzstan is one of the countries. Last year we had a Schools 2030 forum from all the countries, the teachers and the educators had come. But they have, in Kyrgyzstan, there are 100 schools that are benefited by this grant. I visited a school in Osh. Outside Osh, there's a place called Alai. Alai is a mountainous area, small town. Farming is big there. And I went to the school, and kids are well dressed and all those things. So I was talking to them. They say, we have a parent-teacher association, which is to us, it's a normal thing. But for there, this is a whole new thing. And the Schools 2030 is a program through which they let the school identify the issues, solve the issues with the input from other school systems. So they formed this thing, and guess what? I met the president of the student association. That's unheard of that in the past in the schooling system. Here we are used to it, but that's kind of impact, that's leadership development, the quality of education, and this is happening. Different schools do different things because they understand what they need in their own school. It's not that one size fits all. And this program, I think the grant was about $25 million, if I remember correctly. And I think the AKF UK worked hard to get people together to get this grant. And it's very well recognized. And last year when we had the Schools 20 Global Forum, it was held at the presidential residence. He offered for them with huge security, but he had offered a big compound with conference areas and all those things. And we had one of the days spent by all the invitees from all over the world to be at the presidential residence complex.
Fantastic. So I just wanted to talk briefly about water, because despite the glaciers and the mountains, it's also a very water insecure country in parts. And as you can see in the map in the top left, it has a pretty fragmented and complicated border with its neighbors. And so those three countries, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, they all share similar water sources. And so with farming happening on both sides of the borders and, of course, other water needs, there's a very limited supply of it. And so this has caused a lot of regional instability, even some very short conflict, and but it is a cause of major concern in the region. And you can see some of the borders, they're very hard borders in many places in the bottom left. And AKF is working on at least the Tajik and Kyrgyz side to help alleviate some of those issues. And one of the ways that it's doing it is through improved governance. So we talk about civil society, a lot of people, it means lots of different things, but these gentlemen here are part of a water user association, and AKF helps establish these in order to improve the governance of water so that everybody can get their fair share. And in addition to that, we're also improving the infrastructure. So you see here, we have these concrete irrigation channels, which doesn't sound that interesting, but I found it quite fascinating because previously it would be mud irrigation channels, and you're going to get a lot of seepage that way. A lot of water gets wasted, and the water doesn't go as far. But through just simple infrastructure like this, that water is going to travel a lot farther and go to many more farmers and reduce the tensions that are there. So this is just some of the ways that we're working with communities on both sides of the borders to reduce tensions simply through the improved supply of water resources.
Yeah, I think the other area which is very innovative of AKF and ACFED, these are the synergies that come together.
ACFED,
ACFED and AKF coming together.
But maybe perhaps do we know Aga Khan Fund for Economic Development?
Sorry, Aga Khan Fund for Economic Development. I think
we get lost in the acronyms.
I know. It always happens to us, like boom, boom, boom. But this is an interesting program because this is very well recognized by the government. They really love this kind of program. But what happened is the Aga Khan Fund for Economic Development and AKF together has, particularly in Kyrgyzstan, has identified the young entrepreneurs. What they do is they support the early stage entrepreneurs for small and growing businesses. They have a training program and they have a early stage funding for about $50,000. And the innovativeness of these kind of programs comes in is when we were asked, the ECD, and we'll talk about ECD a bit more, but I just want to give the synergies here. There was only 26% of the kids who were going to ECD just a couple of years ago. And the government was very concerned about, how do we increase? And they want to increase from 26 to 40% in a matter of a year, and 60% by the next year, which is a tall order. But how do you kind of increase? And this is where the AKF with their experience with early childhood and the ACFED with the AP. So the folks in AP entrepreneurs, they started looking into how we can open the ECDs. So the ECDs were opened, the businesses were flourishing, kids were getting access to education ECD. At the same time, they were getting the funding, and they were able to kind of open more and more ECDs, and we, AKF, were able to put in the quality. And this was an amazing synergy that really the government looks at it as a very positive input by the AKDN at large. Over a period of time, with this, the young entrepreneurs comes in tech area, and so far about $3.5 million has been invested by the AP, and they're about 98% is the repayment rate, which is unheard of in a lot of countries. And there are about 50 acceleration. We have ECD. Another one is tourism. There are people who have started Airbnb, quote unquote, by learning this thing, and they open, they get some house, they put some beds there, and they really start the business through these kind of access to learning the management. And they've been about over 1,200 startups with AP so far in Kyrgyzstan. So these are the real things that has impact on people's livelihood, and also not only livelihood, but also impact the education at the same time.
Fantastic.
Yeah, this is when I was, we were in Alai area of Osh. It's about 2 hours drive. And to me, it was fascinating to see the cattle. It's like what happened here, right? So on the left, you see the cattle who's really very weak. In rural Kyrgyzstan, your asset is counted with horses. If you have a horse, it's about $1,300 it's worth. If you have a cattle, it's about $600, $700. If you have a sheep, it's about $200. So the more you have livestock, the more you're wealthy. Land is limited. The challenge part is these cattle have to go, as I said, 94% mountain, so they have to go up grazing. So as they keep on going, and there are no technology to replace what has been grazed. So what happened is over a period of few generations, this is what happened to the cattle. Now, AKF, what they did was they had this what called veterinary. They started as a program as a veterinary medicine kind of thing, for the how do you take care of the animals, health and all those things. And they then, with a grant from Sweden, they got this Angus artificial insemination from the Angus breed. This is what they brought. And on the right side, you see a much healthier cattle. Initially, they had a rough time. The owners would not let you do it because they say, well, what are you going to give it to them? We're doing this thing and that thing. It takes a lot of time to work. And I think that's where AKF has done an amazing job by working with the communities to educate them, take their own time. But now it has become, it's a bazaar where people come and they want to kind of buy this Angus, cattle with Angus breed. And that has made a huge difference in their wealth, because their wealth is, this is what their wealth is.
Okay, Jalalabad, we're moving down the road. So again, X marks the spot. Don't worry, we're going to make more rapid progress than just a mile or two down the road for the next stop, but just so you can see where it is. So this is Karimkul with his wife, and I met them back in 2019. And he's a farmer that AKF works with many farmers, but he's one that we're going to talk about briefly now. And he runs a nursery, so he produces crops that he then can share, saplings and all the rest of it, and seeds with other farmers, and they tend to be climate resilient crops. And we work with him to spread this kind of knowledge and this technology out to other farmers. And here he is. His crops, as I mentioned, everything is built around climate resilience because, as you know, this is a part of the world that is heating up at twice the rate of the rest of the world. And he produces beautiful apples and pears. And just as an interesting aside, I don't know, perhaps some of you know, but this is the part of the world where apples originated from. And they here in Kazakhstan, and they were wild apples, and they've gone into all the different shapes and sizes that we know them today, but those seeds were carried down those trade routes that we spoke a little about earlier. And as another interesting aside, this has nothing to do with our work, but I like to tell it anyway. Here is this picture of Karimkul that I took and I was quite proud of. And so I sent it off to National Geographic Traveller magazine, and it's just speculatively, and they did a story on it. I was very proud of this, and I thought, fantastic, this is great. And I managed to get the Aga Khan Foundation's name in there, so tick that box. And so I sent it to my colleagues in Kyrgyzstan, and then they did something really lovely. They printed it and framed it, and then took it and gave it to Karimkul. So you can see he looks pretty pleased with his picture here. So that was a fun thing to do. Now, we're traveling down the road. This is called the Jailu, the summer pasture. It's late summer here, which is why it isn't quite green, but this is where the semi-nomadic people in Kyrgyzstan bring their herds to graze. We're racing along the road up towards Bishkek. You can see some of those famous yurts that you probably know a little about or have seen from Mongolia, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. And I just thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the national flag of Kyrgyzstan, because as you can see, it's made up of this radiating orb with the 40
tribes.
40 tribes. So
40 rays.
40 rays.
Of light, and then the...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So these are the 40 tribes of Kyrgyzstan that have been united. And in the middle, we have this crisscross pattern. Does anyone know what it is? There we go. So at the top of the yurts, the ribbing inside them is built like this, and it crosses over to create the shape and the structure. And you can see how significant this is to Kyrgyz life, culturally, politically, that it's placed right at the heart of the flag.
Just to kind of, the 40 tribes, If you talk about Kyrgyzstan, if you don't talk about Manas, it's not a good thing. Manas is the epic, and he's the one who brought the 40 tribes together, and that's what it's something. He was there, or his just story is there. I don't know. People talk about it, but Manas is something you remember when you talk about Kyrgyzstan.
And in case you wondered what it looks like inside a yurt, this is the sort of the scene. This is quite a smart yurt. Right along the way, this is these men and women at prayer, probably sometime in the late afternoon. I think 80% of Kyrgyzstan is Muslim, and it was introduced to the country in about the 8th century. Some other Islamic sites along the way. You can see this one is incorporated. I think it's from the 8th or 9th century, and it's incorporated. You can see the Buddhist swastika in the doorway there. It's incorporated other kinds of religious iconography into its design. Now, the capital, Bishkek. So you can see where it is on the map. We're up in the north, and it's a beautiful city, very green, large boulevards. We have the Soviet history and some of the scenes here. And just near where that central scene is a street, and I'm not going to pronounce it particularly well, Zhibek Zhulu Street, which literally translates to Silk Road Avenue. And so caravans once traveled along through this part of the world, and it's still today a bustling part of the world, or part of the city. And I'll take you on another little tangent. Does anyone know where this mosque is? Or can take a guess? Istanbul? Anywhere else? Okay, well, it's actually in the middle of Bishkek, and it's on that Silk Road Avenue. And you can see, you were quite right to suggest something like Istanbul or Ankara, because it's an example of Ottoman revival architecture, and it's only about probably 20, 30 years old, I'm not quite sure. And it's built with Turkish funding. The Turks, as Barkat mentioned, the Turks and Kyrgyz share the same or similar linguistic, cultural Turkic roots. And many people of Central Asia traveled all the way along the Silk Road and ended up Turkic peoples in Turkey and became part of the Ottoman Empire and otherwise. So they have this really rich shared history. I think Turkey is the largest investor in the world in Kyrgyzstan. And they share many links and roots still today. I think we're real short on time, so I'm going to move us on to Sonkul, this beautiful alpine lake. You can see where X marks the spot here, and you can see, isn't it gorgeous? This was taken from a drone, and we're about 3,100 meters above sea level. Yes. We've got these, this is where really semi-nomadic territory, and I'll hand over to Barkat to tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, this is an interesting picture, but you see the yurt and the kids around. This is actually a kindergarten. What happens during the summertime is the families go up on the hill, because that's where the animals goes and grazes, and then they keep on, they're nomadic. Kyrgyz is a nomadic culture, so they can't put those yurts, and the kids miss out on the ECD. So AKF actually invented, what they did was, if the kids don't come to you, go to the kids. And these are called Jailu kindergartens. So the teachers go there, and then the kindergarten happens there in the mountains, in the outdoor. And that's where the learning takes place. And this was so well received by the government that they're now more than 100 Jailu kindergartens. It's kind of a trademark that AKF invented this in Kyrgyzstan.
Fantastic. Now, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to read out a passage from the book about this very place. And I'll keep it relatively short, but it will hopefully bring a bit of color to it, more than I can recall speaking. So I might as well wear this Kalpak hat while I'm...
So this is Kalpak. That's a hat that Kyrgyz...
Okay. At Sonkul, a lake at the center of an enormous plateau atop the Tian Shan mountain range, the sense of space under the huge dome of the blue sky is profound and almost spiritual. I have visited few places on earth that feel like a genuine wilderness. This is one of them. At 3,060 meters above sea level, the road flattens out and the shimmering blue lake appears over the horizon. Thousands of grazing horses, sheep, cows, yak, and camel fill the landscape, herded by men on horses wearing traditional Kalpak hats. White yurts, the homes of these semi-nomads, dot distant valleys, their impact on the environment negligible and ephemeral. The sense of isolation here is magnificent. My companions and I spent part of the day walking, each of us in a different direction. This sublime and vast landscape is best enjoyed alone, and the experience is meditative. Sunsets turn the sky and the lake brilliant oranges and pinks. Grazing horses cast long shadows. After a hot soup and a plate of lagman, I went to bed in my yurt. Even in my clothes, a sleeping bag, and wrapped in a duvet, I felt the cold. A man arrived at daybreak to fire up my stove. Through bleary eyes, I watched his face glow and the fire grow. Warmth at last returned. Right, horse riding. Let's talk about that. I mean, this dates back millennia, and in many cases, children often learn how to ride before they can walk, so they're expert riders, let's say. And I'm going to play a little video here, and Barkat's going to tell us what's going on.
Yeah, this is Kokburo. This is the sport that is played. It's like Buzkashi. It's horse-mounted players who attempt to place a goat carcass in a goal. So you can do it. It's a pretty rough. This is when I was in winter. I was in Issyk, and this is what I saw, and I filmed it because I just want to kind of mesmerize by it. It's a very tough sport, by the way. It's not a child's play anyway, but it's interesting to watch this one.
So we have a goat carcass going into
the goal. It's actually well created, and when they come together, it's brutal. It's brutal. You think American football is brutal? I mean, this takes a cake.
Okay, so let's talk about the head of the goat.
Oh my God.
What's going on here?
So when I got appointed and I went to Narin my first trip, so the governor, in my honor, had a lunch. I said, thank you. Not knowing he had sacrificed a sheep. And he said, as a guest of honor, you got to cut the ear of the sheep and eat, and then make it to pieces and give it to him. So I had to kind of these are from medical school, my surgical skills. I had to you see cutting the ear of the goat. It's, cutting into pieces. I had the first piece, and then I gave it to the governor who had it, and then the other folks had from that plate. It was, don't ask me what the taste was. It's a boiled cartilage kind of thing. I couldn't chew properly, but I swallowed it. And then I think, sometimes, you don't want to be too smart. And I was culturally intrigued. So I asked the governor, like, what do you do? So he said, you know what? They eat also the eye, they give eye to the, but he said, look, I'm not going to give the eye, but there's one more thing. He puts his hand into the sheep's head, pulls out some piece and puts in my mouth. This is for your honor. And I said, I could have lived without that honor, but culturally, you had to respect it. You learn about culture, different culture. And this is truly a respect for imamat, for the AKDN work, and this is what he did for us. It doesn't happen to everybody. I mean, I've been to see the governor with multiple ambassadors, but this doesn't happen to all of them. This is something special he did to welcome me to Narin. So this is one of the things he do.
Fantastic.
That's a governor sitting on the right side, on the other side. Yeah.
Okay. A few more scenes from Songkul, and then we shall move on. We're going down the road to the famous Narin. I just wanted to include this as it's sacred spaces along the Silk Road. We all know the famous mosques and temples, but I don't think anyone could tell me the name of this shrine on the road, made out of a shipping container, but I thought it was a wonderful sight. Okay, Narin. You can see a little bit of it in the background there. Here we are. We're kind of in the center of Kyrgyzstan. And I'll hand over Barkat to talk us through this.
This is the aerial view of University of Central Asia, the Narin School of Arts and Science campus. It's one of the most, it's probably the best, I may be biased to say that, but it's probably the most beautiful university in all of Kyrgyzstan. I've visited many universities, but this is fantastic. It's an $85 million investment. And this is just 30% of the larger plan. So it was founded in 2000, and it's an international treaty signed by the governments of Tajikistan, Kyrgyz Republic, and Kazakhstan, and the Ismaili Imamate. And it's ratified by the parliaments, registered with the United Nations, because during that time, thanks to then, I think the Imamate the legal advice, and they really made it very airtight, all those things. And it's obviously, as you know, secular nonprofit. And there are 3 schools in that. This is the School of Arts and Science. This is the Narin campus, which offers communications, media, and the other major they offer is computer science. Now, people ask me, how much does it cost to educate? It costs $28,000 per student per year. And you know how much they charge? They charge $6,000 to $7,000, but the average collection per student per year is $1,400. So the gap is filled by the imamate. Because sometimes questions are being asked, right? This is where, and why do we do it? And there are about, I would say about 40%, 85% of the students come from 3 countries. But from Tajikistan, most of them are from Gorno-Badakhshan area. There are students from northern Pakistan and so forth. Khorog, they have global economics and earth and environmental sciences. That's where the major is. But the other also, the Graduate School of Development they have, and School of Professional Continuing Education, which we'll see later. But this is something, it's something you don't even see in Western countries, the kind of quality of construction. And I've taken people, including the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, and she was completely floored. She said, I can't believe, what was His Highness thinking in getting it in Narin? I said, don't ask me, you can ask His Highness then. But they still can't believe that somebody can put this kind of university in Narin. This is the School of Professional Continuing Education, SPC. This was the first one. There are 14 learning centers throughout Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and Afghanistan. And this is one of the things which is a hidden jewel, I would say, in what it does for the community. We have about 150,000 participants in all 4 countries. In Kyrgyzstan, 34,000 have graduated from that. They offer short courses. Be it, they look into what is required in the region. They do a need assessment, English, computer science, short courses, management courses, all kind of different kind of courses they offer. But that has really catapulted a lot of people's lives. One of them actually opened a hotel in Narin. It's one of the most beautiful hotels. You stayed at Khan Tengri?
Possibly, yes.
Khan Tengri, that's the only hotel, the best hotel.
Be.
It's a beautiful hotel, which is better than a lot of hotels in Kyrgyzstan, actually. And this is Narin. And I think what this one, when you see this, if you show it to somebody from Habitat, Agency for Habitat or Focus, they'll say this is the disaster in happening, right? You see this is a linear town. This is the center street, the only street in town, Lenin Street, and there are side streets to that. On the top of the area, that's UCA, is situated there. And this is something that synergies of AKDN agencies came together. We got a grant, AKF, the AKA got a Aga Khan Agency for Habitat. Thank you, I remember that. And they got the grant of $5 million from the Swiss, and AKF put $1 million there. And what they did was first did the hazard assessment of the town, and then we presented it, and then created a master plan. We presented to the mayor and to the governor of Narin and said, look, you can build things here, you cannot build things there, because that way, when the town planning happens, this hazard assessment comes in place. And the whole idea is to make the town resilient to natural disaster, to economic disaster, health disaster. They also asked us to help in cardiology at Narin Hospital, in the regional hospital. So we work with the government there also. But the whole idea is to create a university town which can, over a period of time, is resilient to all the natural disasters. This is the park that Shah Karim opened with the Prime Minister when he opened the UCA. And this is the park, they had never had this kind of park. And this became an impetus for the city now to have more kind of these parks. And you can see the young people. This is right in downtown, right in the center of the town. And they had offered, one thing they did, offered free Wi-Fi. So you can sit there and use free Wi-Fi. But this has really changed the outlook of people. You go in summer, the kids are playing. It's just an amazing, it's just next to, it's right across the street from School of Professional Continuing Education, right across that. And it's just an amazing place. We have a lot in culture. One of the things Kyrgyz government has been very particular is they have seen how the shift to the Western civilization has been, and they're very concerned. When you talk to them in one-on-one sometimes, their concern is how we can maintain the tradition, Kyrgyz tradition. And one of the things that has been done since this has been 20 years, I think work with the Swiss government and the Aga Khan music program now, which was initiated then, is to create a program called Ustad Shakirt, which it's a Kyrgyz word, which is similar to Ustad as master, Shakir the disciple. But they have done is they've created 8,000 plus students has been trained. They go to the schools, train young people to play the local instruments and to recite Manas. Manas is an epic, 500,000 line, this longest epic that is from this. They just recite that comes to us. But that's kind of thing that they're doing is learning traditional instruments and how they can play, keeping the songs alive of the Kyrgyz tradition.
Another shot from Narin here. I'll talk briefly about this gentleman. As you can imagine, it gets very cold in the winter in Narin, down to minus 30, 40.
Some places minus 40.
Minus 40.
Akbashi all the way.
Yeah.
You went to Tashrabat. On the way to Tashrabat, you pass Akbashi.
Yeah.
That goes minus 40.
There we go. So cold. So AKF, through a number of initiatives, supports entrepreneurs and small businesses. This gentleman, as you can see, has this wonderful greenhouse. And greenhouses in this part of the world go a long way to growing fruit and veg that otherwise you wouldn't get for 6-8 months of the year. And this allows people to get that vitamin C or other nutritious food. But this gentleman has turned his into a rose garden and produces rose for weddings, for celebrations. I think UCA is a buyer, amongst others. So this is just some of the ways in which AKF is supporting people to develop new livelihood opportunities in pretty extreme conditions.
We do also have a diagnostic center in Narin. It's an outpatient, but it's got multi-specialty, and that really served the town very well. It's going to be more important, this diagnostic center, as we move towards supporting the Narin Regional Hospital. When we started working with them, we want to make sure there's a primary health associated with cardiac diseases. Cardiac disease is one of the number one killer. You have people in 30s and 40s dying because of cardiac disease. Vodka rules, smoking is there, the amount of meat they consume, and Narin is the best meat, they say. And the nearest hospital even to get something done is in Bishkek. If you get some heart attack, you get treatment which 40 years ago some countries are offering, not even most recent. So we've been working with the government to do it, but when we presented to Aachen Health Services, they said that we have to do it together with the whole program about education, prevention, treatment, follow-up. So we're working with the government to establish that, thereby investing more and more in Narin there.
Super. We're on the road again. We're reaching towards the end of our journey, and I wanted to take you here before we get to the end. This is a place called Tashrabat, which is a sort of 8th to 10th century caravanserai in the middle of nowhere, which is quite unusual because caravanserais, which are the sort of historic hotels of Silk Road law, were usually built 30 kilometers apart, which is a day's journey on horseback or camel or whatever it may be. But this one is sitting out there on its own. It has an air of mystery around it. We're about 100 kilometers from the Chinese border.
Yes.
And so often
less than that, actually.
Less than
yeah,
that.
much less than that, yeah.
Much less than that. So Chinese travelers would come here and stay on their way to other towns along the way.
It was the first caravanserai when Chinese, during Silk Road, when the Chinese traders crossed into Central Asia, this was the first caravanserai that was there, yeah.
And then this on the way back is an Islamic cemetery, as you can see here, often built outside of the cities in these, or towns in these really spectacular settings. And if you would like to know more about that, there is University of Central Asia has produced a book on it.
This professor, actually, she was the head of the Cultural Heritage Unit, Elmira Kuchumkulova. She produced a book, and you know, it's amazing that how they put together, the Kyrgyz population put together their old pre-Islamic tradition and the Islamic tradition they put together in how they can bury the people in Islamic rites, but maintaining pre-Islamic traditions. Wonderful story she can talk about. Yeah.
And we're back to where we started this talk, which was about how AKDN started to be in Kyrgyzstan. So we're on that road to Tajikistan. So there we are. We're crossing the border. And at this point, we'll say thank you very much for your attention, and we hope you enjoyed the journey.
Dr. Fazal and Christopher, where do we start? Our heartfelt thanks and gratitude for taking us on such an immersive, thought-provoking journey, one filled with discovery, connection, and inspiration.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barkat Fazal and Christopher, for that inspiring talk. Your insight and stories have truly brought the Silk Road and the work of the Aga Khan Development Network in the Kyrgyz Republic to life for us this evening. I hope you all enjoyed the talk and will leave here feeling more connected, informed, and inspired. We're truly blessed to have you with us today. And thank you again for traveling all the way to be with us. I would like to take the opportunity to invite our Honorable Chair of the AKF UK National Committee, Erem Kasem Laka, to present our speakers with a small gift.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you, Erem. I would like to pass back to Anushka just to wrap up today. Thank you again so much. And thank you so much to our speakers. As I said earlier, they traveled from Kenya and Central Asia to be with us today. So thank you.
Thank you, Shodigal. Events like these don't go ahead without a large team of volunteers. So please join me in thanking the Ismaili Centre Events and Management Team, the National Council Secretariat, the AV team, and the IVC team for all their time, commitment, and support. last but by no means least, thank you to you, our audience, for your time and participation this evening. All that remains is for me to say Kudafis. We wish you all a safe journey home, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next event as we continue our journey along the Silk Road. Thank you, and Yali Madad.